So people can actually hear me. But welcome to the Artist Exchange Radio Show. I'm your host, Nate. We're here on another Friday. We're now, well, we were in November last week too, but I guess winter has officially started. So Baltimore, just watch out. We have an interesting show today. We're going to be talking about a few hot topics. We're going to talk a little bit about critical race theory. We're going to talk a little bit about Will Smith. I just heard some interesting news about Travis Scott, so I want to touch on that incident as well, and then we're going to sum it all up with some mental health conversations about self-care and maintaining your mental health. As I spoke for the last couple of weeks, I kind of disclosed a little bit about where I'm at currently, coming off of the almost 2-year span now in the middle of a pandemic, and how that can affect you and how we need to really think about it. And then I have one little conversation that I'm gonna end up, because we have a couple of events that's coming up. Also in the course of the next couple months going into the new year. I want to say first, thank you to everybody who voted for myself, the Artist Exchange Radio Show. So that's everybody associated with it. My Vashti Blue Jewelry Company, as well as I was nominated as Renaissance Man of the Year for the Baltimore Crown Award. So if you go to our social media, you'll be able to find the links where you can vote. The event is actually next Saturday. So shout out to everybody who is a part of the Baltimore scene, Baltimore Crown Awards, Ms. Year, and all of her many individuals. Hey, Nicole. But I also want to just say thank you to everybody. I have a number of friends that are being nominated this year. Tracy Jiggets, Troy Burton, Joshua Dixon. I'm trying to remember all the names. I'm going to forget somebody. Easy Jackson. Oh, my God. Shinyear, Dumore, Baltimore, Lady Breon, Safi. So go to vote. So you can go to the Baltimore Scene.org and you can vote for your favorite artist. I'm just saying, for me, I was voted as Best Radio Show, Renaissance Man of the Year, and Best Vendor for Vashti Blue Jewelry, my new studio. So definitely go there. I really appreciate it. Being nominated is such a humbling experience, because you don't know who may have voted you in, and then you have to get a certain amount of votes to be able to be on the ballot. So I appreciate you all. Yet again, we have a couple awards from the Crown. So thank you once again. Hope we win. I'll see y'all next Saturday. Come out and support. It's going to be at the new Garage Music Center right here on Lafayette and Charles Street. So come on out. Come on, support. And yeah, thank you. So that I wanted to start by saying that I wanted to start the conversation as we're going to end it on a mental health note. Please be mindful of your mental health. Do daily check-ins, and it's the winter time. So not only have we been in a pandemic for almost 2 years, we're also going into the winter time, which is a typical time for depression, seasonal depression, and all those things. Remembering people that you lost. And coming off of a 2-month span for myself, where I've lost a couple people over the pandemic, and then losing my grandmother 2 months ago. Now time has flown by. So going through all that, doing daily checks with myself, with my friends and family, and just making sure we're good. And sometimes good doesn't always look like what you want it to look like. So just be mindful, do checks, because your mental health can manifest itself into a physical ailment. I was getting really bad headaches in the back of my head, and I didn't understand what it was. And I went and got a CAT scan, and my doctor didn't find anything, but said stress can definitely be a culprit in this case. So not overstressing yourself, walking away from things that are outside of your control, that are bringing you stress and anxiety, and just eliminating people from your life that don't bring you happiness. And then be mindful of the things that you are doing. Because for every finger we can point, there are three fingers pointing um, back at you. Nicole, I'm feeling much better. We had a comment. I'm feeling much better. I took 2 weeks off and only really did like one or two things, and that's really just my show. And I haven't really done much else in the last 2 weeks, but I was home. I kind of did some cleaning and just did a lot of meditation and soul searching, and really just focused on me and eliminated anything or anybody that was was stressful. And that really has helped. In our last couple of days, I've felt extremely better. I'm not back to my 100% self, but I'm doing great. I'm still working, still creating. So I'm here in front of you. So that says a lot for me. One, I want to shout out to our guest from last week, Mr. Brian Jeffrey. He will be, his show, Dream Girls, will be opening up at Center Stage this week, this coming week. So I'll be there Tuesday. So get your tickets. Tickets are selling out. So get your tickets. Art Centric out of Morgan State University are doing great things, and they have partnered up with Center Stage to produce Dream Girls, which is one of my favorite musicals. So come on out, come share the space with them and enjoy them. I have a special guest today, Miss Mia. So once we bring her on to the stage, if she can unmute herself while we're bringing her on.
Hi, good evening.
Hey, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Nate.
Doing good?
Yes. Yes.
She is sporting her Vash Top Blue Jewelry Originals.
And I have to get more. Yes, I have to order more. Absolutely. And I just want
always love seeing a gracious customer.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your grandmother. Grandmothers are very special. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that.
It's a different type of love. It's a different type of love that you have for grandma. It's not more or better than any other relationship, but it's just something different about a grandmother's love. Just like it's nothing like a mother's love.
Absolutely.
But yeah. It definitely and many of us lost people throughout the last 2 years, and just in general, if you lost somebody, grief is never beginning and ending. It's never beginning and ending, because even if it subsides, it may come back as a memory at some point. So always checking in with yourself and making sure, we can't, as Black people, we we have to stop saying I'm okay.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Really not, and really express that feeling. So we're going to talk a little bit about feelings a little bit later. Will Smith's book is currently on pre-order, but you can order it now on Amazon, and it'll be to you on the 14th. But we're going to talk a little bit about him, and then we're going to ease into the mental health awareness. But I wanted to talk a little bit. You brought up Travis Scott, our former mayor, Stephanie Rawlins-Blake. I was about to say Sheila. Stephanie Rawlins-Blake. Is currently the spokesperson for Travis Scott. Shocking news. And I guess she's ready to, come from behind her desk and do some more public work. But the issue of surrounding Travis Scott is an issue that many artists are now in a space of, and it's been the last couple of years too. Things have happened where stages may have collapsed during a festival, or there may have been a fight that broke out or something, but the attention always seems to go to the headliner. In this case, it's Travis Scott, because he was actually performing during the confusion and then ultimately the death of 8 people. and I believe 300 people were actually injured and had to go to the hospital as well. But do you agree with people blaming Travis Scott?
No, I don't. I don't think. I think that he should have some level of accountability, right? And I think as an artist, right, and we're both artists. I think that we are naturally empathetic, right? So I think that
Right.
he should have some level of accountability and take some responsibility. But I don't think that we should be canceling him. If he was made aware that this was going on and he still continued to perform, then that's one thing. But from what I've been reading, I don't think that that's the case. You know what I'm saying? And so I think the concert promoters, I think, why are we having 50,000 or how many people were there during a global pandemic? Why are we having?
Right.
Yeah. Like, why are we having those kinds of concerts?
And Lollapalooza is known for, I went once. It was too many people for me. I didn't even want to go in. Like, there are plenty of places around it and the main stage. I never feel comfortable in outside events like that. It's just something that's just not comfortable to me, because something like this could happen. And if you're too far inside of it, you got to wait till all those people behind you have moved out before you can exit or escape. So what happened. But I do agree. It was, watching that was like, was this something that happened years ago and they just bringing it up? But the fact that all those people were still in that space and we're still in a pandemic.
Thank you.
I think yesterday, all of the states have finally reported their numbers, and we were back up to over 100,000 cases, new cases.
Right.
So
right.
I need people to realize we still haven't gotten this under containment. We haven't contained this as of yet. And I'm not saying stop everything like we did last year, but come on, let's be more mindful of stuff like this. Versus is doing a great job. Well, they're opening up arenas as well. So I can't even say Versus battle because they're doing the same thing. But real quick, before we go any further, I want Mia to introduce herself. Let us know who she is, what she does.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mia Miata. I'm the neo soul Nina Simone. All right. And I am a local artist here in Baltimore. I am a vocalist, a mother, a teacher, a friend. I teach adjunct at Baltimore City Community College. I'm a product of Morgan State University and the Baltimore School for the Arts. Okay. I want to just a quick plug. Here's my CD, Mia Miata's Urban Arias, which is available on all streaming platforms. Okay. I am also a new author. Here's my book, The Goddess Code. And I want to talk to you about helping me promote this. The Goddess Code, which is available on Amazon. The Goddess Code, which is available on Amazon and Author House Publishing. All right. And I'm a social activist. I'm currently at Morgan State University and pursuing a doctorate in community college leadership. And interestingly enough, Stephanie Rollins-Blake was mentioned in my dissertation proposal because my dissertation proposal is going to be focusing on a group of GED students in the Sandtown, Winchester community of Baltimore, post Freddie Gray, the uprising. So Stephanie Rollins-Blake is a very interesting topic, I think, to begin the show with, considering that she was the mayor during one of the most trauma-filled events that our city has witnessed in the last 20 years. And what I'm afraid for her, right, is that because she's a Black woman, right, she's a sister. And regardless of my personal feelings for her, I want her to succeed and I want her to win. Right. And for me, I think that she'll be labeled as like the trauma queen, right? Because she was the mayor of our city during such a traumatic time. And now she's being brought into this chaotic situation with Travis Scott. And I don't know that that's a good move for her. But we're gonna let it play out and see what happens.
And it's unfortunate because she came in on the heels of trauma in the city. And but she came in on the heels of one of the first times in our city's history where all of our top leadership roles were being
Held by Black women. Absolutely.
led by women.
Black women.
And well, not all Black women. I think it was like one senator, one white senator, but mainly Black women, majority Black women. And I didn't want her to fail, but I think her reaction wasn't what her constituents wanted.
Right.
What the people of the city really wanted for her and needed for her to be in that moment. So unfortunately, you know, she's gotten a bad rap based off of her response rate. But I think her being in this position may be something different from her because she always gave really good speeches and was really she's intelligent. So I'm not taking away from her intelligence. I just think certain jobs aren't for everybody. Right. And I think maybe as a spokesperson and definitely as a lawyer, I see her being much greater at those positions than maybe the mayor.
Right. Absolutely. No, and she comes from a political family, right? And I may think that that was something that was in her career past, right? Just like O'Malley, he never wanted to be mayor; he wanted to be governor. He wanted to be president. When he had a very horrible presidential run, but I like to say is that what I think Baltimore sometimes the mayor of Baltimore is a stopping ground for people who aspire to, but for example, William Schaefer, Baltimore was his heart, and he was our mayor for many, many years, and then went on to be governor and comptroller. Right. But I say all to say, you can feel, right? We were talking about empathy earlier. Right. You can feel when someone's interests are at our best interest as well, Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. It's very clear. So, I wish her well. I hope Travis Scott, sometimes we have to say no to stuff. Mm-hmm. Or put our demands down and not be afraid that someone's going to say, well, we'll find somebody else. Because a situation like this could have been easily prevented if they would have put more restraints on how many people could come on, but I guess money rules the world. And this is the result of, chasing money, not speaking just to Travis Scott, because he's not going to be financially liable for a lot of this. Those promoters are, the organizers of that event, the owners of that venue. Those are going to be the people that really have to pay, but they're just going to put his face out there. So we're going to know, everybody's going to think it's his fault and everybody's blaming him. But as artists, sometimes, your best bet is to stop the show. That the show must go on mantra is a very toxic notion that many of us have been ingrained in. And as an artist, once he saw that something was going on, he should have, in his responsibility, should have been to stop the show. Because at that point, he had that power. So figure out, but I hope he doesn't get the brunt of this and everybody else gets off scot-free like most people do in these situations and blame everything on him, being though he was on stage and he was one of the headliners. But I wanted to then touch on that, and I don't want to beat up our former mayor because our Monty and her don't have the best relationship. So,
right.
But I wanted to transition into a conversation that I had. So I have joined a new app. It's called the Stereo app. It's a lot like Clubhouse, but it's similar to it, but it's not really like it. It's called Stereo app. And I started a conversation. My first week on there, that was part of my mental health. I started doing things that I wouldn't typically do. And I joined this. And one of my first conversations was about and it just jumped out my head. What is going on today? The critical race theory. And this big debate that Republicans and the Trump supporters really are pushing the narrative of it being taught in our schools, which is truth and false, mostly false. The historical value of what it is being taught in our history classes. But it's the critical race theory is not something, I'm putting that out there for all the ignorant people on all sides. Critical race theory is not taught in any schools other than select schools like Harvard, law schools. That's where it's being taught. Elements of what it is, and the critical race theory at its simplest form is a question. Because it's a theory. And the question was, why does systematic racism still exist? Or why does it exist? That was the basis of the theory. In its simplest form. I'm quite sure it was much more complicated than that. But as I know it to be, that's what the study was in the 70s, the early 70s, by a group of students out of Harvard, not Howard, but Harvard. So it's not a racial issue. It was studied, but it was some Black and people of color, about 12 of them from Harvard that came together and did an independent study on why is this still happening after decades of segregation, civil rights movement, Jim Crow. Why are we still at this place in the 70s? And this was after King's death, after Malcolm X's death, after many of our great leaders in the struggle had already been killed off, including our president and his brother, the Kennedys. So to be in the helm of the 70s where everything was free love, but we're still facing systematic racism. And that was the question of it. And now it's been usurped into a battle tool to fight against the Democrats in a political kind of pull and tug of it all. Because I kept hearing it, it forced me to go and do some more research on it and figure out the origins of it, and understand the elements of it that we have learned. And we've learned about the civil rights movement. We learned about segregation. We learned about Jim Crow. So the elements of that we learned about. But that was typically in high school or in general college. We learned about those things in our history classes, social studies classes. But it's been a lot of people around the country, mainly white women, who are going into these PTA meetings, having these awful arguments with the school board and the powers that be about they're not wanting their child to learn about critical race theory, which is crazy because they learned about critical race theory. They just didn't know that that's what it was. Right. So how do you begin in your doctorate program and understanding what curriculum is and what studies, African-American studies are? You're going to a Black university now. How do you feel about people not wanting their children to, one, learn the truth in history?
Well, it's interesting you say that because my study is underpinned by the CTR, by the critical race theory, that basically says that racism is structural, right? It's systematic, okay? Even within white culture, you weren't even considered white unless you were a landowner. That's how the whole what's the thing that we use when we vote? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. But
I think it's just this Friday. The ballot or
no, when the states have a certain amount of votes they send to the electoral college. The electoral college. Yeah, the electoral college was based off of how much land you owned, right? So when you think about Maryland, think about Calvert, Cecil, all these were white people, right? But Lord Baltimore, these were white folks, right? So to say, like you said, to walk into these platforms and say, I don't want my child to learn the critical race theory when you have benefited from the critical race theory is hypocritical. And it's all, and no disrespect to my white friends, my white girlfriends out there, but it's always white women who have benefited, right, from the critical race theory, from systematic racism, from the structural racism, more than anyone, more than even white males, right? From the 70s on up. To today, even before then, like you were saying. And so it's interesting because we have to teach our children the truth. We have to. we have to teach it. White and or Black children, all children need to know the truth that racism in this country is structural. It's inherent, right? You can't get away from it. Point blank.
I tell people all the time. So for me, I went to a charter elementary school, and then I went to a Catholic middle school and high school. My elementary school was Black women-led, very much so steeped in African-American history. So I had a great foundation going into these predominantly white Christian schools, Catholic schools. So I was better off than a lot of my students, other Black students, that may have not had that deep Black history foundation. And I remember middle school wasn't as bad because we ultimately got a Black male and he taught us history. So it wasn't, but he still was a little like, because he went to predominantly white schools, it was still a little skewed, but I understood. And it was people, like I was able to insert things that I knew in that class. But I got to high school, Archbishop Curley, I went to this school and I got one class of Black history, and that was slavery. And I had 2 history classes in high school. There was a World Civ class where I learned about every other culture but African. And then before that, that was upperclassmen, but my lower class history class was U.S. history class. And it was started with slavery, and my white 20-some-year-old teacher told me and a young man, I'll never forget his name, Kojo, he was the only 2 Black kids in that class, that slavery was not as bad as we have made it out to be.
Wow.
And he likened us slaves, or our ancestors who were slaves, to farm equipment. And he said, would you beat your tractor? And that was slavery history. Segregation was me and Kojo would use as example. He said, Kojo and Mr. Couser, please leave the room. And as we left the room, he said, this is an example of segregation. And I left out the classroom and I contemplated, what do I do? So I kept walking and Kojo tried to bring me back. And I said, no, I'm gonna just have to get in trouble today. Because I can't sit here and listen to this man lie to this room. And it was probably like 20-some white kids in that classroom. And you wonder why our children, the Kyle, what's his name, Rittenhouse or whatever his name is, why they grow up believing the way they do.
Right.
Because our schools, and no disrespect to my mother, but we as Black people send our children to those types of schools thinking that they're going to get a better education. And that is what I got for my mother's almost $20,000 a year.
Right.
That's what I got for her paying that about that much every year. And that I got that one day of history. Even when we would have multicultural week in the cafeteria, it was never any African food in there or any Caribbean food in there. So the fact that we don't want our children to know the history, and I'm not blaming it solely on us, but we are taking part in this. We are allowing our children not to be educated. How many people don't celebrate Kwanzaa? And it wasn't anything religious. It was simply to give you doses of your own history and culture.
Right.
And we usurp every other holiday, every other religious or non-religious holiday that is someone else's culturally created holiday. So this topic really upset me in a way. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just think it's interesting in these conversations that we're having about diversity and inclusion, right? How the critical race theory is excluded from those conversations, right? And so everything that you're saying is absolutely correct. I went to Catholic schools my whole life. I went to a Catholic school my first year of high school, and it was extremely racist. And I was not prospering there. I went to Mount DeSales Academy my first year of high school. And I was pulled up and my counselor said, what's going on with you? And I said, I don't want to be here. She says, well, where do you want to go? I said, I want to audition for the Baltimore School for the Arts. And within the arts culture, that racism runs rampant and especially in the classical world, or like you said, Broadway and all these other genres of the arts, where racism runs rampant. You can, and I experienced it at the Baltimore School for the Arts.
Did you know a Black woman started that school? Created that school.
Wow. I never knew that.
No, you would never know it from being in the building, because her picture is nowhere.
Wow.
A friend of mine, really good friend of mine, Coffin, is now the acting director, executive director of that school. The first time in its history that it was a Black executive director of that school since it was opened up. Nathan Carter from Morgan.
Yeah, that
helped to open up that school.
Yeah, that was my
helped to open up the school. And I'm trying to think of the woman's name, and it's really has escaped my mind. But she was the Black woman also who helped open up the UB Blake Center prior to, then went and helped opened up the School of the Arts that's been usurped as this white organization. You would not even have known that. I just learned it this year when my friend became the executive director of that school.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was an opportunity for what non-talented white children to prosper. That's what it was. I was a senior. I was on the opera ensemble. I was supposed to have the leading role. It was given to a white girl because why? Her mother contributed to the board. Her mother sang on the Baltimore Opera. Guess what? Negro, get to the back. And so Nathan, I was sobbing in the audience, and Nathan Carter came to me. He pulled me up and he said, you stop that crying right now. He says, I'm taking you with me to Germany when you come to Morgan. So I wanted to go to Howard. I didn't want to go to Morgan. Morgan is like 13th grade. Let me tell you something. I stepped foot on Morgan's campus. And I felt nothing but love. And he took me to Germany. I sang on the choir. I sang with the Philadelphia Philharmonic. I had so many great experiences within the arts culture because I chose to go to an HBCU and sing under Dr. Nathan Carter. Dr. Nathan Carter saved my life. He did.
And it's frustrating to me that an institution like that, got into the hands of these people, and then it just became a legacy of, even to go, if you go to the website, it's buried deep down that she is the founder of that school. And I'm trying to remember her name. It's going to come to me by the time we finish, but, the conversation that I had when I was on that app, it was really, we had a couple younger Black people and we had some older people, and then we had a white guy that was on there. And it was just interesting to hear the points of view. The younger guy, of course, did not understand the frustration of the older people hearing information like this being used as a weapon and not as a tool. Having our history kind of tossed out and little by little be chopped away. In Virginia, a bill was just passed to get Beloved stripped from the reading list of high schoolers. And I want to say Louisiana, the first young lady to be integrated into schools in Louisiana. I don't know why names are going out of my head right now, but her book was stripped off of the reading list as well. So we're now in a space where you are offended by factual history.
Right.
And not so much so liking it. And a lot of them are liking it to us being frustrated by these statues that were taken down. So in retaliation, we're getting things like critical race theory being used as a propaganda tool. Or Beloved, the story of a mother who instead of having her children face the same life she led, she killed them. Or killed one of them. Or the Ruby Bridges story. That was the name of Ruby Bridges where she was the first Black person to be integrated into the school system in all of Louisiana. So having these stories being stripped from, because we don't want to upset. And what frustrated me on top of all of this, Condoleezza Rice went on to The View to talk about not wanting white children to feel bad
About being white.
what has happened in history.
Yeah, right.
Like, Condoleezza Rice, aren't you from the South?
Yeah,
Like,
this is the
I
thing.
don't.
This is the thing, though. Okay, I white people, they have to have a certain level of accountability, and if it wasn't your grandfather, your father, or your auntie or your uncle, the offspring of these people have to be held responsible. I'm sorry, I'm not making any excuses because you're 12.
Well, and I agree with you because they benefit from it. Whether it be the Extra Mama company or the whiskey companies or this company or that, Walmart, all of these companies that benefited from slave labor at its origin, or usurping the ideas or inventions of Black people, but now they're benefiting from it years later.
Absolutely.
You can't tell me that you don't deserve to have accountability.
Thank you. Absolutely. Henry Ford, his idea came from a Black man, right? That's generational. They're children's children.
The peanut guy. What's the peanut man? I can't even remember. What's the peanut man? The man who get all in the
George Washington Carver.
Right. Henry Ford was helped by him also.
Right.
The idea of the production line or using a certain type of. I'm so thankful that I had the elementary school that I went to. Carolyn Blackwell, Winona Rock, Lorraine Lockhart. I'm trying to think of the other teachers. I can't think of them all, but I'm so thankful. Cynthia Etheridge, I'm so thankful. Judge Mitchell's wife, Karen Mitchell's wife, Miss Mitchell, having that as a foundation. I can only imagine how ignorant I would have been going into these predominantly white schools being whitewashed.
Right, absolutely.
And being basically sold the victor's side of the story.
Right. I was just offered a job at a Catholic school, and they were basically begging me to take it. It was a social studies teaching job. And when she said that I would be it was a predominantly Black, all girls Catholic, Black and Latina, all girls Catholic school, but I would be one of the only Black teachers. That was a red flag for me. That was a red flag to say, this is not the right position for me. This is not, although I would love to help our girls, maybe not in that platform is not for me. Because I feel like I'm already walking into a situation where I'm not going to be successful, right?
Yeah, and it happens that way. It happens that way. I remember going into high school, and I don't know if you know Archbishop Curley, but most of their teachers, we have some teachers who aren't of the cloth, but the rest of our teachers are friars, like robes, sandals, rope around the waist friars. And going into them with their ideologies, their Catholic ideologies, and then having these racist white teachers teach you and be mad at you because you don't know their history and they don't know anything about you all.
Right.
That school, it was traumatizing to me. Had I not been a naturally quiet person, I probably would have been in jail. I probably would have been arrested. I probably would have gotten expelled for the first time ever in life. But I can't imagine people still sending their children to these types of schools.
Right.
I regret not going to St. Francis now. I really regret not going to St. Francis. But that was meant to be like, that's the ghetto school. You don't want to go to that school. That school's so ghetto.
It's across the street from the jail. You don't want to go over there.
Yeah, and I regret it now. Because many of the people I know who went to that school had a well-rounded education. the first Black order of Black nuns. It's still steeped in our history. It's still steeped in our culture. But we are so hell-bent on doing things the white way.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think this is going to end?
In terms of
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because I think that voices like Condoleezza are quickly dismissed by those of us who know the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think is that this critical race theory conversation needs to be had on many platforms, like the platform that you were talking about in Clubhouse and this is the microcosm to the macrocosm, right? Even if it's up to us as Black educators, as Black artists, to have these conversations with our children, to walk on a college campus and say, hey, have you ever heard of the critical race theory? What do you think about that? You know what I'm saying? Because what we're talking about is systematic and it's systemic and it's deep rooted, right? And it's up to us, we were talking about George Washington Carver, to pull out those roots, right? Did you know he was castrated? That's why his voice was so high. He was a contralto. His voice was so high because they had taken his manhood essentially from him as a young boy, right? And so, but he was a pioneer. And there are people like George Washington Carver, and you talked about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Those are the kind of people that will never be replaced. There will never be a George Washington Carver to walk this planet. I mean, of course, there'll be proteges and people like him. What I say, all I have to say is that our ancestors were way makers out of no way. So it's up to us to have these conversations to make a way out of no. The critical race theory isn't going anywhere anytime soon, or the discussions behind it or discussions around it. And we need to keep continuing to have these conversations. So when you were telling me earlier that this is one of the conversations that you wanted to have tonight, I was so excited because those are the conversations that we're not having.
But it keeps happening in this way where parts of our history are being slowly taken away. And they're tricking us into believing our vote, our voice doesn't count. So many of us aren't even fighting these issues at the ballot. The idea that Ruby Bridges' or biography can be taken away. In Louisiana, of all places. Or a beloved story can be stripped away from the reading and parts of our history. As a teacher, I teach in schools. So I know that there's a big list of things that I cannot do. But the one thing that I do, and it gets on my principal's nerves every year, every time I go to another school, I photocopy at least 300 photos of Black faces. And I plaster them. I don't care what the demographic of my class is. I plaster those faces around my room. And I remember the first time I did that, I had a white principal have them taken down over the holiday weekend. And I was so mad, like, this is, I know that you don't want people to feel bad about themselves. So you want me to, it was mainly like Black actors and such. So you want me to put a Tom Hanks up there and all these white faces up there. Why? When my school the demographic of the school don't look like that. But I want them to know that there are other actors. They can just see that all the time. But if you can't tell me who Whoopi Goldberg is, but you can tell me who Tom Hanks is, that's a problem in my book. Being a theater teacher, that's a problem for me. And I don't think people care to understand, even people that look like us, what it's like not being represented in your classroom. That's your foundation years. That's the years that determine the person that you'll be. So thankfully for me, I had a beginning that was really strong. I went to school on Pennsylvania and Dolphin. And I got that deep history, and that became my foundation, and everything else was just, mixed in there. But what about those students who did not, who parents chose to send them to, say, Friends from beginning to end? What was their education like by the time they're my age?
Yeah, but interestingly enough, you go to college, you go to PWIs, predominantly white institutions, and they have whole courses built around Toni Morrison. They have whole courses built around Ruby Bridges and the civil rights movement. Okay, so what I'm saying is that they're tapping into that knowledge, right? They want to know our history. They understand how important it is, right, to read a Beloved or Sula or The Bluest Eye. They understand how important those pieces of literature are, and that Toni Morrison should be included in the canon, right along with, Langston Hughes or her white and Black male counterparts. You see what I'm saying? But when it comes to, like you said, on a middle school, elementary school level, those kinds of works are deemed taboo, right? So it's interesting, the dynamic and the dichotomy.
It is. It's not, but it's not the content that they have reverence for. It is her technique of writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Style. I don't even think they see her content. Even you being a music artist, look how many white people have kept Nina Simone's name alive. But do you think it was her content that they love so much, or her gritty style, her gritty classical style?
Yeah, absolutely.
They love that more.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Because she was a classical musician, right? Right, absolutely. I agree.
Billie Holiday, they loved her gritty, raw style, but I'm sure they didn't love her content. Her life ended as it did because of her content, mainly Strange Fruit.
And because she refused to compromise on her content. She could have stopped singing Strange Fruit easily. She could have cut that from her repertoire. And what I love about Billie, and I know Tracy Jiggins does such a powerful poem about, and she mentions Billie Holiday in the whorehouse and all of that stuff. But I say all to say that
whorehouse to Carnegie Hall.
Yes, absolutely. From the whorehouse to Carnegie Hall. But what I love about Billie, and please accept what I'm getting ready to say. She was a light-skinned Black woman, right? And she didn't have to be, she was rooted in her Blackness. She was rooted in the essence and the importance and the understanding of what it was to be a Black woman in America, right? She could have easily, dismissed all of that and said, well, I'm gonna just, pass. Or she couldn't really pass, but she could have accepted those social norms.
She could have played nice.
Thank you. She could have played nice, and she didn't.
Yeah, she could have sung those blues songs that they love. Chastity says, yes, they love telling the story the way they wanted to. I guess that's what she was saying. Now that the truth is coming out, they are embarrassed, but they must own their history. The same way we have to always own ours. And unfortunately, our are still affected by the plague of racism, vigorously used against our ancestors. Yes, Chastity. Thank you, Chastity. And that's what I meant by they love our tenacity, our strength, our grit, our unique talents. They didn't love our content. That's why they tried to get us to sing the way they wanted to sing, so it would be pleasing to them and comfortable to them. Even as artists, I've watched many artists have their Blackness shamed out of them. The way we take music, it took them how many hundreds of years to create new tights and point shoes for people of color.
Thank you.
I mean, why has it taken so long?
Yeah, right.
Even knowing we have.
Yeah, and I was going to say, or the body types, for dancers, the body types are, you don't have to be a straight up and down now to be a ballerina. I've seen so many beautiful pictures on Facebook, and one of the captions was like, because you need to see Black ballerinas on your timeline. And these girls were built, and that's, I mean, and it takes nothing away from who we are aesthetically, right? We can dance, we can do any kind of job. All of that comes from us anyway, right? The arts, those are our...
Right. Because I went to predominantly white schools, I grew comfortable with what they thought. Not that I agree with it, but what hurt most is I went through all of that in predominantly white schools and chose to go to one of the Blackest institutes that I could think of Coffin. And I got in my face a whitewashed education in terms of who I should be. Now, that wasn't every teacher, but it still was predominantly there. You know, I thought I was going to learn who August Wilson was, which I did there. But in my English classes, no. I had to only learn that in theater classes. And I had to be constantly told how much more prominent Shakespeare was than an August Wilson or Toni Morrison or Maya Angelou or Langston Hughes. I had to be told that. So I fought against learning any Shakespeare because if I can't learn August Wilson, I'm not learning no damn Shakespeare.
Right.
But we have to stop telling our children. We have to stop telling ourselves and our children, giving our children a whitewashed representation of who we are and taking what is naturally us. And this, you know, here in the art scene in Baltimore, you went through it, I'm sure. Hey, Neil, what's going on? My uncle Neil is on, DJ Snakeskin. But I'm sure you went through it at the School of Arts and probably most other programs you went through where you were being picked apart and being compared to this person and compared to that person. And our window of opportunity is so small, so slim that only one or two of us can walk through it, where they get a whole open gate and they're free to go through that door and do what they please. I've heard so many horror stories about this.
And you know what, Nate? And you know what, Nate? When I open my mouth, I only open it to sing a Negro spiritual. I only open it to sing a African chant. Yes, I can sing arias from Mozart and Schubert and all, but I only that is my specialty. People call on me to say, white people during Black History Month, they call on me to say, can you come and sing that song about how we stole your children's away? That is my signature song.
I love that. I just love it. I've heard them show so much love for it because it reminds them of a part of their history that they love, that made us look like buffoons.
Right.
Like that's what I hear. And it's crazy because of the cycle of education that I got as an adult. I probably stifled myself from much of what I deserved to get because I could not walk that way. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And even today, I try to play nice, but that whole diversity thing is annoying to me because we are constantly being told that because something naturally grows out of us. I'm an artist.
Yes, right.
Like it's just in me. My grandmother, my mother, my uncles, it's naturally in me to be creative. I'm constantly being told that their analytical thinking, their type of learning, they put so much work in it. And whenever we're denied something, the excuse is always, but they work so hard for this. And that's the fight that we have because we don't have to work for that. Our ideas are our story. So I don't have to pull from this out of the air. I can be an artist based off of my family history alone. I don't even have to step outside of my house. Mm-hmm. I can be an artist inspired simply by the people that were in my home growing up. Mm-hmm. And they have to come up with these concepts that's bigger than them. But it's frustrating to have our history scrutinized the way that it has been. It really is frustrating. Nicole says, I applaud you for those pictures. It matters so much in the early years of life. I went to a Catholic school for 12 years and paid to be miseducated. 95% Black, but your Blackness was only acknowledged mid-February because 10 days to prepare to purposely lie, 8 days to celebrate, 10 days to get all the shit down. My parents wanted a good education she quoted, good education for their children, but they didn't know the truth about the Catholic history.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And that's just private schools in general. I'm not just going to blame it on Catholic schools. It's private schools in general. Many of my friends went to, well, it's still Catholic, Loyola, Georgetown, a lot of from my middle school, we got opportunities to go to many different schools, but we all had a similar struggle. Like it was out there, and it's frustrating to understand that I had a better opportunity than many of my friends and my cousins my age and such, but I might as well have went to Booker T, or I might as well went to Douglas. I might as well, not saying that they're any less, but I might as well went to those schools and dealt with the struggle that would naturally come from going to an inner city high school versus going all the way across town to Sedonia to be treated like less than. But
and exactly, yeah, what Nicole said hits on point, because even you talked earlier about Mother Lang and the first order of Black nuns that was founded right here in Baltimore. The Catholic Church still does not acknowledge her as a saint. The first Black man who was ordained a priest in the 1800s in this country is still not considered a saint, given sainthood by the Catholic Church. So, and we all know that the early Christians were Black.
I think they called the Oblate Sisterhood.
Oblate.
Yeah.
The Oblate sisters. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oblate sisters, absolutely. And we all know the first early.
That's St. Francis Academy. That's St. Francis Academy.
That's exactly right, Nate. That's exactly right. And we all know that Africans were the first Christians because Jesus was a Black man. Anytime his parents could have taken him to Egypt and he blended in, he was a man of color. And I'm not going to just say man of color. I'm going to say it. He was a Black man, right? So we already know that that the 12 were Black, that the women that followed him were Black, right? That the early Christian movement was a Black movement.
Why wouldn't he?
Say that again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said, why wouldn't he be?
Perfect. Boom. But exactly.
Just the way history has been usurped and turned into, and we know history is based on the victor, whoever won, who had the power at that moment. So the story is always from their perspective. We get that. I understand that. But at some point, you have to say history is history. Yeah. And I can love the old Dixie South, but I have to acknowledge that we were enslaving people.
Yeah.
You know, and we have to be really strong about what our children are learning, because many of us in pursuit, because many of our grandparents and parents paid money for us to be able to go to these schools. I respect my mother for sacrificing and being able to afford to send me to private schools. But at the same time, the education that I got there, I was so embarrassed after that day of history. I was so embarrassed, like, because I had to face those same white faces. I had to go to lunch with them. I had to go to gym with them. I had to, walk between classes in the hallways and having these same guys laugh and snicker. Neil says, we as African-American parents should be teaching our children about African-American history at home, starting from when they are young. So they have that knowledge to ask questions in the classroom. I totally agree, Neil. And Neil's a teacher as well. Nicole, the Roman Catholic Church played a major role in slavery, as did every other white culture in this world. Neil says again, when they see those gaps, right? And one of the things that I have to say, I'm not telling parents to stop sending their child there. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, be active in what your children are learning. Understand what your children are learning. You need to well-verse yourself in what you want your children to learn, especially start that with your history. It was nothing wrong with me learning who Shakespeare was or who those white playwrights were as an acting major, but I needed to learn who I was first. I can't learn who you are, and then build that into me. I can't, because then I'm not being who I'm supposed to be. If I don't first know myself, if you didn't first learn those spirituals, who would you be in this moment? You'll be out here singing these arias and not even knowing what you're talking about. Not even realizing what you're singing about is against the people that look like you.
Absolutely.
So that I'm gonna let critical race theory sleep for a moment, because it was that conversation went on for hours, because people just all of us, I think we're trying to get that one young person to get it. And he's not going to get it until life actually shows up for him and gives him that gut punch. And he realized he's not one of his white friends. He's not. And you learn that very early on. For some of us, we learned that very early on. And some people need to learn it like an O.J. Simpson down the line. You learn
absolutely.
that. I wanted to transition the conversation over to Will Smith. Recently, Will Smith has begun to expose his journey, and now he being, I believe he's 52 now, he's in a different space of his life, and he is going back and showing us his journey. So for the last 2.5 years, he's been working on his memoir, his autobiography, as well as going on this health journey as he gets older. And I think that plays a part in it, but I think that's more his vanity. What I found most interesting is his story. And a lot of his toxic behavior stemmed back to his relationship with his dad and watching his dad first beat his mom. And hearing Will Smith talk like this, because Will Smith comes from a part of the entertainment industry where they were trained what to say, they were trained what not to say. Anything personal about them was kept under lock and key. And what began to happen is, I believe their children began to go out and explore the world and didn't know who to trust and let people in who then begin to go out and tell their stories. And I think that's what happened. But for years, they would deny some of these stories or not really speak on them. But Will Smith is basically exposing a lot of those things that he helped to keep secret in his family. Have you seen any of the clips that he's been doing on YouTube?
I have, and interestingly enough, I've been paying more attention to people's responses in regards to, Will's having a mental breakdown or he's having a midlife crisis. And I think it's important as a Black man for you to recognize that Will is speaking his truth, right? Will, and Will was, Benny Medina and all of the other people that were surrounding him when he was young in his career, they were grooming him, right? And there were certain things you said and certain things you did not say, right? And we all know that Will Smith had this squeaky clean image, right? And so it's interesting to hear him say, yeah, I got caught by my mother having sex with my girlfriend when I was 16. We think of the goofy Will from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We don't, and almost we didn't, even though we saw him date on the show and he was very flirtatious, it was almost like he wasn't sexual though, right? Even with Theo's character in on the Cosby Show, they were kind of like sexual, but they weren't. It was like the writers of the show, and of course Bill Cosby, who was executive producer, made sure that those certain boundaries were not crossed. When we all know, 16, 17, we doing it. You know what I'm saying? Our parents might have called us once or twice. You know what I'm saying? And so it's interesting that to see him open up. I like this Will. I do. Yeah. I don't think
it's more authentic.
It is, and it's not toxic at all. I think it's healing. I think it's part of his healing process. It's part of his healing journey. And you said you're going to talk about later about self-care. It is part of his self-care, and it's lethargic for him to share these stories and to give zero, about what people think about him.
I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it from the perspective of being a Black man and being constantly, I didn't grow up in a household where my mother said, don't cry, but it was just an unspoken truth. Men did this. I had all these uncles that represented this, that were tough guys for the most part, and this represented a certain type of person. It wasn't until I was older that I was introduced to Black men, because I didn't have a Black teacher in elementary school. I had one Black teacher in middle school, and I had no Black teachers at all in high school. So I went through 12 years of education and had one Black man that looked like me that came in the last year that I was in that school. And that was helpful, but it still was, a misrepresentation because he didn't come from a space that I came from. So watching Will go through this, you see him kind of transform into a different self. Nicole says, whenever Black people speak their truth, they are having a nervous breakdown. By the way, I'm from Philly. and that's the so we're going to get into that part in the last part of the conversation about mental health. But this idea that Will Smith is doing this in front of the world, I have to say thank you to him because I know it's not easy because he speaks a lot about the ideas that he had implanted in his head where he's always been the jokester and that's how he's coped through life. He used to use that as a tool to keep his dad from beating him and his siblings or his mother. And he thought that's how he kept the peace. And then that became his mask that he wore. So watching a Black man, and it was moments where he would break down and, you was reading the comments, people calling him soft or, less than a man because he is expressing a real life emotions. And it's sad to me that we are still in a space where Black men aren't allowed to feel, but we expect them to be well-rounded, adjusted, successful people. And he's shown success, but he's also now showing us vulnerability. And I think it's a unhealthy aspect of our culture as Black people and people of color that we can't show that without it being seen as a weakness and such. My Aunt Val says, Will Smith kids are having a privileged life crisis. I think they are, but I also think they are more equipped than many of us have been. They know how to go to therapy. They know how to talk out their problems. They know how to experience life. And I know many of us feel like, because I remember my mother telling me before, my grandmother wanted her to let us just have a taste of what struggle was. So my mother is the oldest of 11 children. And my grandmother thought it was necessary for me and my sister to see what struggle was. So she didn't agree with my mother having a TV with cable in my room and my sister's room, or me and my sister having a phone line in our own phone line in our room, or she thought that my mother was spoiling us. And I feel like our parents have worked to that point, but to show your children that type of struggle will only put them in the shoes that you're currently walking in and not and set them up any better. So I just remember my grandmother saying that to my mother, like they gotta feel what struggle is. They get a hot meal and choose what their meal is every night versus, whatever you can afford. And I just remember that conversation. So I'm listening to I'm listening to seeing my aunt understands because it becomes where do we want to go backwards? Do we want to go backwards? Right now I see how physically beating a child isn't healthy anymore because that child could possibly grow up and have animosity and or fear of you that's translated into anybody that may look like you. So how healthy is it to keep doing the same things that we've always done and not grow? But I'm seeing an example of a man that I always wanted to see this type of man grow up because I felt like that's who I was. But I never saw a man cry or I think the first time I ever saw a man cry was at my grandmother's funeral. And I think my uncle, who youngest one, was really trying to keep it in, but you have to show emotion at some point in your life, and keeping that in will turn you into a person that you're not, and that you shouldn't be, rather. Audience note, make sure to share the show to people that need to hear this conversation. Please share it out. Please. I beg of you, please share it out. But yes, thank you. Please share, like, subscribe to Be Exposed, the Artist Exchange Radio Show on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. But I wanted to transition that part that I'm seeing from Will Smith into a more mental health, self-care journey. How has your self-care journey or mental health journey been for you?
Well, you talked earlier about, the pandemic, and, we've been in this space for 2 years, right? It was maybe like a year in, and I realized I haven't opened my mouth to sing one note in almost a year. Humming on the radio or something like that. But I felt that, it was affecting me, my spirit, right? And my soul, my purpose, right? And I said, okay, I got to get out of this space. The choir where I sing at church opened it up for like 2 or 3, 4 people, maybe 1 soprano. That was me, 2 altos, a tenor, and a bass, right? And so I got in the space of being, like you said, creative again, right? I was teaching online. I would run to the store. I would come back. It was like I walked the dog. It was like this monotony that I had gotten.
Routine.
Yeah, this routine I had gotten into. Right. And, my father passed away during the pandemic. And,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And my father was the kind of man today that you talk about well-being today. My father was like that my whole life. I always saw my father cry, but I saw my father cry when, years after him and my mother had divorced. I saw him be remorseful and say, I'm sorry, I hurt our family. You know what I'm saying? And so my father was the kind of man that would cry, and he was empathetic and a big heart. He was Aquarius. And so when my father passed away, I was forced into eldest daughter, the responsible one role, right? So that I kicked into doing and working and cleaning out his apartment and making sure his accounts were closed. And I never mourned. And so recently, you said you've lost several people during this 2-year span. My cousin passed away, and this was a cousin that was very close to me. We literally went to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade together in Catholic school. We were talking about earlier, and so we were very close. We went to Morgan State together. So, but seeing him laying in the same place in the same funeral home that my dad had laid in a year prior, Nate, all the grief just came. It was like pouring, the tears, the emotion, all of the anxiety, all of these emotions that I was holding inside because I had to be the strong one, right? Just came pouring out, and it was cleansing, and it was healing, and it was needed. I needed it, right? And so I say a lot to say is that self-care for me recently has been a lot of reflection, right? A lot of dealing with things that I had pushed away, right? I don't have a problem releasing people. When people are no longer, and I'm not saying serve me in terms of like me using them. That's not what this is about. This is about an exchange, right? This is the name of your show, The Artist Exchange. So it's about an exchange, right? But when I'm pouring, right? And I'm empty, right? And I'm not getting anything from this exchange, then it needs to cease. And I have no problem in that area. But the area that I struggle with is the reflective piece, and the being still in the moment piece, right? And so that's what this pandemic has done for me. A lot has made me be still, has helped me accomplish a lot of things. I got busy with that dissertation. I got busy releasing this book. You know what I'm saying? All of these projects, all of these things that I have wanted to do, it forced me into a creative space. So I say all I like to say is that self-care is very, very important. It's very, very necessary. And as Black people, mental health is something that we don't really like to talk about, right? We don't like to say maybe I might be suffering from anxiety, or maybe I might feel a little bit of depression coming on. And I shared that. I was very candid and vivid and transparent on a post that I posted maybe like a year after my father died. And I said, guys, I'm not okay today. And I'm mourning my father and I'm hurting, but I'm going to be okay. And I also said, the peace queen in the inbox, I don't need that. I'm not saying that I'm vulnerable. I'm just saying that I'm hurting, because, sometimes, males will see you, they think that you're vulnerable and see that as an opportunity. That's not what this is about, brothers. This is about my healing and me being vulnerable. I mean, vulnerable in terms of being open and being transparent, right? So this pandemic has been very helped me to be very transparent. Yeah.
And I hear that. Mama Bell says, my mom and grandmother did not ask us questions. They told us what to do. Will Smith and his family are having the same issues us poor folk are having, and they are keeping it real. And she also says, self-care for me is actually working, testing, and helping people understand that this is a wake-up call. And we have to get it. We have to shift ourselves into a space where we are not repeating cycles. Because the more we repeat those cycles, the more toxic we become. The more I'm in the process of writing a book. And one of the things that I believe is holding me from doing it is because I haven't really had the conversations that I want to speak about in the book. I haven't had those in real life. So watching Will Smith go through this is confirmation to me that this is a real feeling that I'm having. And I did not feel comfortable exposing my story if I did not first have the conversation with family or individuals that are being represented in this book. Or people who are involved in my story. I'll say it that way. And it has been the hardest part for me to say, you hurt me, or this doesn't feel good anymore, or I'm not feeling good today. The last 2 weeks, I just stopped coming into my office. I stopped, communicating. I would stop posting because I had to make me feel good. And I had to stop just trying to press on. My aunt is on here. And one of the things that I learned from the women on both my mother's side and father's side, I learned how not to hide my feelings. I learned how not to just suck it up and keep it moving, because ultimately that will turn into a physical problem. And I love the people in my family. I don't want my aunt to be, typing or Twitter fingers. But it's more so I learned what not to do because I saw how unhealthy that was for them. But even in me seeing that as a child and growing into an adult, I still took many parts of that with me. I learned how to hide the truth. I learned how to deny my pain. I learned how to substitute my true feelings. I learned how to do all of that. People have to understand that children are picking up and they're learning from you. And it's not just what they're saying. Children listen to what they see. They don't really, their learning style is often different from yours. So they're not really grasping what you're saying to them because they don't have the experience to be able to understand what you're saying. So they mimic what they see you do. Relationships, communication, lying, all of those things. Abuse. I'm really shocked that it was at one point in Will Smith's thing where he has a brother and a sister. And his brother was the fight. His sister was the flight. And he was, what did he call himself? The fun. So he had to mask it. He had to mask it. He was a person that was absorbing a lot of those feelings that everybody else was feeling. We have to learn how to say when enough is enough.
Will's a Libra, so he's going to be that, but he's going to try to keep that balance going.
Cassidy says, yes. I always say, how can you correct a behavior with the same behavior? We are the same behavior. We are bred to be strong and hide our pain, but in reality, we recognize our strength from acknowledging our pain. Chastity says to be strong. Yep, I'm on that growth path, Nate. To know it's okay not to be okay. Nicole Newman says, as parents, we have to create emotional safety so that our children are free to be themselves, know what self-care is and what it's really about. I teach, so I don't bash any of my parents. I used to when I was younger. I no longer do that because I'm learning how to correct my teaching style in terms of what your learning style is. So our communication is clear and we both understand each other. But one of the things that I have to always tell my parents, your child is absorbing your emotional struggle, whether you're talking to them or not. They know when you're quiet and you're not being responsive. They know when you go off and you don't want to be touched. They are absorbing that and they translate that into their relationships with other people. And we have to break that cycle. It's going to be tough. And at some point, one of these generations are going to have to take on that struggle and sacrifice. But we have to learn how to communicate. One of my biggest struggles in life was I wanted everybody to get along. And I didn't know how that took chunks out of me. And me making people be friends with each other who didn't care to be friends with each other. That took parts of me that I didn't know I was missing. So I was starting to be missing a whole arm and didn't realize in me fighting for this, I was using all of this, me. And self-care is very important and it's vital. And it's not just, you're never going to be just okay for the rest of your life or great for the rest. They're going to come moments. There's going to be times when you think about losing that parent or losing that friend or that relationship that didn't work or that marriage that ended in divorce or a child that died at birth or something like you're going to think about those things and it's going to affect you. But knowing how to have a healthy mindset when you join your class and you say to your class, hey, today ain't the day. I'm not feeling myself. I'm going to be okay, but I needed to say that. And many of us are not comfortable doing that. We're not comfortable expressing ourselves, especially being a Black man. The system is not set up for me to do that. I'm looked at as weaker or not a man if I do that. Any last minute thoughts on self-care or how we should best do that?
And even being able to say that I'm still hurting, even if you can't say it, because I heard you mention earlier that you hurt me, right? But what if you can't say it to that person, right? What if you and that person are estranged, right? or that person you have decided to, let them separate from your life, and you're still dealing with, we talked about Stephanie earlier and being the trauma queen. Well, some of us may be trauma queens, right? We may be still carrying around this trauma and saying to us, and we have to admit to ourselves, I'm still hurting. And that's where I am. And you don't want to stay in that space. But like you said, you have to have these open conversations where we can talk to each other and we can help to each other to heal. Even if it's on a social media post, sometimes you don't understand how that there's somebody out there who's feeling the same exact way that you are, right? And just having that common knowledge that we share this shared experience, right, is opening up the gates for the healing experience to take place. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I really appreciate you joining me, and thank you for everybody who have been commenting. And I'm gonna say again, please, we need you to keep sharing and subscribing. This show has been going on for quite some time. A big chunk of my 30s, if not all my 30s, but I appreciate everybody who continues to support in their own way. Thank you for continuing. Thank you for being a guest today. My last question to you is, what question would you ask to your 100-year-old self, and what advice would you give to your 70-year-old self? And while you're thinking about that, I'm gonna just give a couple messages, just give you a couple moments to think about that. But don't forget, the Crown Awards is next Saturday. Please vote for myself and many of the other artists that you may know on the list. We have been nominated for Renaissance Man of the Year, Best Vendor, and Best Radio Show of the Year. So please take a moment, go to our page, BeExposedRadio.com, check out our new news section. If you're looking for a space to start your show, hit us up, info@BeExposedRadio.com, or you can follow the Artist Exchange Radio Show if you're looking for a space to promote and market your upcoming events. So, you ready to answer?
Okay, all right. I first want to thank you, Nate. You are such a wonderful spirit, and thank you for having me, first of all. And you didn't know me from a can of paint. You asked me to come on, and I this was one of the most healing experiences that I've had, and being able to talk openly about anything from the critical race theory to Stephanie Rollins Blake to healing. This is you gave me a.
You coming back? You coming back? You got some comeback arguments, so I got to bring you back.
Okay.
Most times people don't want to talk politics, but we're bringing you back.
I love it. So you're giving me a lot to think about and a lot of takeaways this evening. But what advice would I give to my 17-year-old self? I would tell her it's okay. It's okay to be the little Black girl you've always wanted to be. It's okay to have kinky hair. It's okay to be a Black girl and want to sing opera and want to sing spirituals. It's okay. It's okay to be a nerd and read a book and rather, be intellectual than necessarily go follow the trend. Okay. I would tell her that I love her and that she's going to evolve into a wonderful human being. Right. And so you said, what question would I ask my 100-year-old self?
100-year-old self.
I would ask her, why did you spend so much time not loving yourself for who you really are? Why did you spend decades not loving yourself when you are made in the image likeness of the Most High God, right? That you come from greatness, that you come from ancestors who started the first Black order of nuns in Baltimore, right? Who went from the whorehouse to Carnegie Hall, right? So I would ask her, why did you spend so much time not loving yourself when you're so wonderful? You're such a beautiful person. That's what I would ask her.
And I want people to know that these questions are not they can evolve with you.
Yeah, sure.
These two questions typically tell you where you are right now. And as you ask yourself, there are great meditation prompts or writing prompts or music writing prompts or just a general good question to ask yourself in the midst of a storm, because it gives you a lot of concrete information in terms of where your emotions are, where your thoughts are in that moment. So if you ask yourself this question in a week, it may be different.
Absolutely.
Doesn't have to be, but it may be different. So I suggest that people ask themselves this question as a form of meditation, and it really gives you a lot of good insights, because you're not trying to change history or learn something from the future as much as you are trying to figure out where I'm at in the present. And it's something that I give to my students as a mindfulness training technique. It's something that I use myself now as a way to kind of gauge where I'm at emotionally. And it's something that I normally ask people who come into my space and they're a little frantic. It's a good question to kind of bring you back down to the center. Again, thank you. Let us know where we can find your book.
Sure thing. CD. Yeah, the CD is on CD Baby. Okay, it's also on, I believe it's on iTunes. It's on iTunes and the digital platforms. It's on all digital platforms. And the book is also available on Amazon, digital, or you can get the physical copy. And you can also go through Author House, authorhouse.com, put in Mia Miata, the goddess code, and it should come right up.
And if she's going to send me those links, and I'll share them again on social media. But I know we're a little over time, but can you take us out with one of your songs?
I would love to. I would love to. Lord, how come me here? Lord, how come me here? Lord, how come me here? Lord, I wish I never was born, Lord. I wish I never was born.
They gotta no more. They gotta buy the rest. They gotta go to
yes, and it's on the CD.
It's
It's
called
called
the rest of it.
Yes, Urban Arias. Check it out.
So we're gonna share that, and thank you again. This has been another edition of the Artist Exchange Radio Show. Check me out tomorrow. I'll be on the Entrepreneurs Corner with Mr. Jay McGraw. Also, what else is coming up? There's a lot coming up. Oh, so I'm having a class mainly for teachers, but it's also really great for parents as well, or just people who are having some difficulties in their various relationships communicating. I met a lovely young man, a really talented young man from Alabama, and he is coming up with this process to help us learn our different communication styles. We call them learning styles, the 4 learning styles: audible, visual, hands-on, or written and reading. And he's come up with a great way, and we're going to do a class for him where we're teaching him how to teach, and he's giving his information as well. So I'm helping out a lot of people. If you're looking for a space to be able to promote your stuff, the Artist Exchange is the place for that. So hit me up at the Artist Exchange Radio Show at gmail.com, and we can work all that out for you. So peace out, people. Thank you, Miss Mia. I appreciate you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody. And don't forget to wish Monty a happy 55th birthday.
Happy birthday, Monty.
You tried it. You tried it. I'm not 55 or any out of that.
So just happy birthday, Monty. Happy belated birthday, and happy birthday to Aldo and Nicole as well. Their birthday's passed as well. So again, everybody, good night, sleep tight, enjoy yourself. And I need to get that book too, because I'm gonna read it. I'm on a reading streak. No more plays for a couple weeks. I'm just gonna be reading books. So peace out, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Thank you for having me.